Hello everyone. In this video we're going to be focusing on the 19th letter of the Hebrew alphabet, Qoph. My apologies for having a bit of a delay on making this video. I've had a pretty busy week, but now I'm back on track and I look forward to discussing more of the Hebrew alphabet with you. So let's get started. So as I mentioned, Qoph is the 19th letter of the Hebrew alphabet. The numeration of Qoph is 100, and it is the 29th path on the Tree of Life, which is represented by the 18th tarot card, the Moon. Astrologically, Qoph is represented as Pisces, the fish, as well. So there are quite a few different ways in which we will view this letter as it applies to different meanings, which hopefully will all connect together for you in a sort of bigger picture. So please bear with me with this letter as we will be skipping around to a few different ways in which to approach this letter, as well as its significant meanings. I'm about to simply state a few words and ideas for you to try and keep in mind as these will be applied to the lecture. Perhaps write some of these down if it helps you to remember them as well. So some of the different concepts that are intimate with the letter Qoph that we will be covering is Qoph as the back of the head, Qoph as destiny or evolution, Qoph as a circle as the monkey, and Qoph as Kadosh or holy, as well as Qoph as Klippot, or in other words, the adverse side of the tree of life and its sephirot. We will also, as we have in the previous videos, be viewing two other letters which are intimately tied to the letter Qoph. These connections are going to be slightly more difficult in relating these three together, or perhaps slightly more abstract than the previous videos. As we get deeper into the numerical sequence of these letters, they will become a bit more abstract in dealing with their conceptual nature. I will do my best in my attempts to tie these three letters together so that you may see how they are related. So the first letter we're going to talk about is Aleph, which is number 1, the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet. 100, the numeration of Qoph, its base number is 1 when we reduce it down. So without going into too much detail regarding this letter, as I will eventually be discussing it in its own video, Aleph can be seen as the pulsation of life and death. Aleph is the potential for existence, allowing the rest of the letters to be in existence rather than itself. Aleph is outside of time and can be considered as timeless, as well as beyond limit. Now, an interesting as well as helpful way in which to view the numbers of the Hebrew letters and the letters themselves is by grouping them into 3 different classes. So the numbers 1 through 9, as these are the 9 building blocks of every other number after 9, these are considered the letters that correspond to an archetypal level. Now the next set of letters, which is 10 through 90, are the letters on an existential level, relating to existence. And the final set of letters, which the numerations are 100 through 400, as well as the 5 final forms of the Hebrew letters, are related to the letters on a cosmic level. So Aleph, as the number 1, is a letter that relates to the level of archetypes. The tarot card that signifies Aleph is that of the Fool. So if one examines this card in its traditional sense, being that there are different variations in different decks, they will see a human, many people saying non-gender, and they appear as if they are about to walk off a cliff willingly and cheerfully in a way. So this can be seen as the Aleph, the potential for existence, ready to leap into physical manifestation. The second letter in relation to Qoph is Yod, which is 10, and we get 10 by multiplying 1 by 10. So now Yod can be seen as the Aleph at an existential level. It is the divine in manifestation, hence the meaning of Yod as hand. The hand of the divine is in everything, and just as we have hands as well, think of all the potential we use our hands for in regards to creating something. So where Aleph was limitless and timeless, we now have Yod as a temporal progression. Yod is now within time and is limited to an extent. Therefore, there is a sort of paradox we must face between the Aleph and the Yod. A paradox we must also learn to accept if one is interested in learning the mysteries of existence. We are a timeless and limitless essence caught within a physical body that exists in time and is limited. We are given an expiration date as to when this body will cease to exist, resulting in physical death. This brings up another paradox for us to face. Are we dead or are we living right now? Is death life and is life death? These are some important questions to meditate on, and they can lead to some fascinating insights as well. So going back to Yod, let's look at the spelling of this letter, which is Yod, Vav, Dalet. So the first letter, Yod, can be seen as existence. The next letter, Vav, is a connection that is made. The last letter, Dalet, as we discussed in the Tav video, is a form of resistance on an archetypal level. So Yod can then represent existence that is connected to resistance in order to sustain itself within time. As Vav can also mean multiplication, another way to view Yod is existence that is multiplied, creating life through the use of resistance. As the tarot card of the Hermit, Yod is the hermit which hides within all forms of existence. This card is also the number 9, which relates to Yesod. Remember in a previous video we discussed that Yesod is the machinery of the universe, the invisible battery of vital etheric energy that animates physical reality. Think of Malkut as the puppet and Yesod as the puppeteer. So now we arrive at Qoph, which is 100, and we get that by multiplying 10 by 10. In Qoph, the two letters of Aleph and Yod find their marriage or balance as cosmic consciousness. Qoph is the Aleph and the Yod at a cosmic level. Let's quickly discuss one of the meanings of Qoph, back of the head. In the previous lecture on Resh, we discussed the human brain and the areas which relate to different levels of consciousness. We said that the back of the brain was the level of the unconscious, which, as many people say, makes up 40% of our brain. Now, the number 40 is very peculiar when we discuss this part of the brain, as 40 represents the number Mem, which is the mother letter pertaining to water. If you were to take some time and research different creation stories from diverse cultures throughout history, you will see that many have creation stories that are relating to water. And not only that, but humans are mostly made up of water. We also know that this is the nature of the elements of magic. Water is related to the subconscious and unconscious levels of the mind. Another important thing to note in regards to water is its close relationship with the moon, which is also signified as the feminine mother. Let's take a look at the tarot card of Qoph, the moon. This card is not only showing the moon, but literally signifying water as well, and is tied to the watery sign of Pisces. Pisces rules the 12th house of astrology, and this is a topic in which we will discuss in length in this video. If you are familiar with Carl Jung, you should have heard the term collective unconscious from his work. This was a part of the mind that Jung said was the collective storehouse of all of humanity, not only containing the archetypes which guide and affect us all, but as well as humanity's collective fears. This level of the mind is an intimate level that connects us all and is tied to the conscious evolution of humanity, which affects each and every one of us. This is how we can see Qoph as relating to destiny and evolution, something I mentioned in the beginning of the video. There was a study done with a species of monkeys, which would mainly eat sweet potatoes that were always covered with sand from the beach. So one day, one monkey decided to try washing off this potato in the ocean to remove the sand, and lo and behold, he discovered a new technique. So soon other monkeys began imitating the same behavior, and astonishingly, monkeys from different parts of the world began intuitively doing the same thing. So this is the same principle in humans and how we feed one another information unconsciously. It is how we evolve together in a sense. This is how we can see Qoph as relating to destiny and evolution. Um, Again, I mentioned that Qoph also means monkey. I wasn't referring to this part of the video as giving that connection. We'll get into that a little bit later, but ironically, I ended up using monkey. Um, so going back to Qoph, this is a very broad topic that we can spend mass amounts of time discussing, this whole collective unconscious. So for the sake of staying on track, we won't go into much more detail. If you are interested in learning more, just begin researching the collective unconscious. You'll find tons of stuff on it. So now the 12th house in astrology, Pisces, that I mentioned, which is the letter Qoph, is the house of the collective unconscious. Keep note of that, as we will be coming back to the topic of Pisces in the 12th house. Now, I know that may have been a lot of information to take in as we got a little sidetracked, but perhaps you can begin to see the intimate connection between Qoph, cosmic consciousness or collective consciousness, as well as the moon and water, Mem. There's a fascinating evolution that we have gone through if we go back in time and analyze how humans used to think in comparison to how we now use our minds. The first human beings actually were dominated by the unconscious aspect of the mind. This was how they perceived the world, not essentially seeing themselves as separate from reality yet. So it was almost kind of like a dream, how you and I dream. That was their reality in a sense. The archetypes of the collective unconscious were far more real to them than they are for many of us today. Over time and through the process of evolution, we have consciously evolved into a different form of consciousness, which is now dominated by self-consciousness, the 10% of the brain we primarily use. As we are still evolving, we will slowly begin to enter a new form of consciousness over time, which many Kabbalists call the messianic form of consciousness. This is the purpose of most spiritual systems, to willingly speed up this process in us, so that we may inspire, and help others to do the same. This ties to another meaning of Qoph, as relating to destiny. What is our destiny as a collective whole, and what sort of consciousness are we slowly evolving into? If you are interested in this topic, try reading the book Up from Eden, A Transpersonal View of Human Evolution. It's written by Ken Wilber, and it discusses this whole evolution of consciousness from where we started to where we are going. So as conscious beings, we are limitless like the Aleph. However, our consciousness is held by a vessel, the body, and it is stuck in the illusion of physical reality, or the limitation of existence, which is Yod. As many people know from quantum physics, without the cosmic consciousness of Qoph to examine physical reality, it would cease to exist in a sense. The projection of consciousness is what allows the image of reality to exist for us. So now you can see how Qoph as cosmic consciousness is the reconciler between Aleph, which is the potential for existence, and Yod, existence itself. One last thing I will say in regards to Qoph as the collective unconscious or cosmic consciousness is an imagery that I like to use. So imagine an ocean, which Jung tied to the symbolism of the collective unconscious, ironically. See its waves moving in different directions, different speeds, having variations in size and shape as well. These waves may appear as individuals because of their differences, just like you and I, yet they all fall back into the same unified body of water. This is the nature of consciousness when we forget about our names, our labels, and differences. As you look into the eyes of someone else, it is that same consciousness, that same ocean, which stares back at itself. So this is another correlation between Qoph as cosmic consciousness and the element of water as well. Keeping in mind that Qoph is tied to the tarot card of the moon, let's quickly discuss Qoph as a circle, one of its other meanings. So as you know, the moon has much to do with cycles. The moon was used especially in agriculture by observing these cycles. This is why Yesod, the machinery of the universe, is represented as the moon on the tree of life. Yesod deals with these cycles and patterns of nature that are always changing. A cycle can be viewed as a circle. Think of the cycles of the moon, the seasons, the zodiac, etc. We start at one place, and through a series of progressions, we arrive back at the start. It is interesting to note that the path of Kaph, which is the Wheel of Fortune tarot card, shows a wheel or circle, which is the continuous outpouring of the elements of nature. This path connects to Netzach, which then flows down into Malkut through the path of the moon, the path of Qoph. Now, when we take the letter Kaph and we spell it in its fullness, it equals 100, which is the same as Qoph. We can now see Qoph as the constant movement or circulation of life, which ties back to the concept of evolution, or the evolution of experience. We use these cycles of life in order to slowly realize our true spiritual natures. So now I suppose we should take some time to discuss Qoph in relation to Pisces and the 12th house, because this will actually show you the connection we are going to make in seeing Qoph as Kadosh, which means holy, as well as Klippot, meaning shells or husks. The 12th house in astrology is the last house in the zodiacal progression. This is a house in which I am intimately connected to, as much of my birth chart resides in this house, including my sun sign. For those of us who are not well educated on this house, it can be a total nightmare for us, as the 12th house deals much with what is secret or unconscious in our lives. So I'm going to list off a few keywords that will help give you an idea of the 12th house. It is the house that exists in an area between life and death, a sort of gray area. It is the house of mystical enlightenment and mental insanity, the house of dreaminess and beauty, and the house of nightmares and horrors. It is the collective dreams of humanity that drives us in life, and the home of the humanity's fears which haunt us as well. This is the house that deals with the mystic as well as the criminal. It is where we can find absolute liberation or become trapped in our own unconscious prison. So many people who are born under the sign of Pisces suffer extreme unconscious sensitivity, as well as a great danger to fall into drug addictions as a means of escaping reality. Other Pisces also possess immense abilities that lead to spiritual attainment. For those of you who are familiar with Edgar Cayce, the sleeping prophet, will know that Cayce was a Pisces, which was heavily connected to his unique gift. Cayce could willingly enter a self-induced trance state in which he would access all information of past, present, and future, allowing him to make astonishing predictions, many that were accurately true. This was due to the influence of the collective cosmic consciousness of Qoph, where all information resides at once. So with these traits of the 12th house in mind, let's discuss the shadow self. The 12th house deals with the shadow self in the human being. Many of us cringe at the thought of our shadow side, thinking that it is an evil side of us. I will say that our shadows can cause us to do evil, the Qlipphotic aspects of ourselves. Yet, this is when we continue to repress and ignore the shadow. One must know that the universe operates through balance, just as we need to do. Therefore, the Qlipphotic aspects of ourself, which are tied to the shadow, become augmented when we are not in a state of balance. Now, maybe you can see the paradox this house offers in regards to it being the place of enlightenment or prison, heaven or hell. This is the importance of learning to integrate the shadow side of ourselves rather than reject it. The shadow consists of the things that we were told we could not do based on what our parents said, as well as the society that we grew up in. These are the cultural taboos we grew up with. For instance, a young boy feels the urge to do ballet in his younger formative years, and due to an unconscious attraction he has with this art as well. As he expresses this interest to his parents and friends, he is ridiculed and told he can't do that because it is too feminine. It is simply not normal for a young boy to do ballet. Due to a repression that this young boy suffers from in not allowing this creative energy to manifest through dancing, he is soon haunted by the urge instead, which is resulting in a neurotic habit or pattern. So if we don't allow this energy to manifest the way it originally wanted to, it will find another way to manifest, most times in a negative manner. There's a way in which I like to describe these shadowy aspects of ourselves to others. So think of a child who is sitting at the dinner table, wanting to express themselves in some way, resulting in shouting or talking over others in order to get the attention that they desire. The parents don't want to listen to the child, so they send them to their room to sit alone. Over time, they keep sending the child to sit alone, allowing them to feel more unwanted and unheard. And at some point, the child snaps, and this results in a sort of unruly, even violent behavior. Although this is a bit extreme, let's say that this child then grows up to be abusive towards others, possibly even a killer. This is what happens to the shadow aspects of the self when they remain locked in their own room. This now brings us to the concepts of Qoph as either being Kadosh, meaning holy, or a Klippot, an adverse quality. This is the difference between the virtue and the vice, the paradox that the 12th house of Pisces, Qoph, contains. For those of you who are somewhat familiar with alchemy, they will know that through a series of operations, we are working to transform lead into gold. Now, lead, being the dullest and heaviest of the metals, is ruled by Saturn. Saturn, as we have discussed with Tav, is related to the cosmic mother of Bina. Although we won't elaborate on this too much, just take a moment to tie together some of these words and concepts relating to the mother or feminine archetype. Saturn or Bina, the moon, water, mem, unconscious, 40% of the brain, Pisces. These are all different aspects and concepts of the divine feminine, which is again related to the collective unconscious, the cosmic consciousness of Qoph. In biblical terms, the figure of Eve is the feminine principle or polarity, pertaining to the concept of life. In Hebrew, the word for Eve is Chava, and Chava equates to the number 19. As I mentioned earlier, Qoph is the 19th letter of the Hebrew alphabet, showing this intimate connection. So going back to Saturn in astrology, there are many malefic things that are written about Saturn, and many people are taught to view it as this sort of heavy, evil, and negative planet. In the discussion on Tav, we discuss Saturn as being our limitations, our obstacles. I like to view Saturn as our strict cosmic mother who wishes to help us grow through tough love. So now take a moment and ask yourself, if I were already perfect, whatever that word means, or enlightened, how would I know this? If there were no personal limitations or obstacles that I needed to work on or overcome, no changes I needed to make in my personality, how would I even know I was growing? This is like someone saying all they knew was happiness. How would you know you were happy if you never have experienced sadness? How would we be able to grow spiritually if we had no adverse qualities to work with? This is an intimate connection that Qoph has to the Klippot and the concept of Kadosh, holiness. Let's take a look at the word Klippot, which means shell or husk. So when we eat a banana or another type of fruit, maybe even a nut, What is it we must do in order to reach the essence of what we are going to ingest and enjoy, accessing its nutritional value? We must peel away the husk or shell in order to get to the fruit or nut. Going back to alchemy, this is the same idea as turning lead into gold. If one were to actually burn physical lead down, it would leave a golden residue behind. In a clever way, this is showing us that our own personal lead, our shells, hide our spiritual gold, our holiness. Without the one, the other would cease to exist. Now take a moment to tie this idea into what we discussed in regards to the shadow side of ourselves, and learning to accept and integrate it into our lives. So in a sense, we can say that by learning to transmute our Klippotic natures, we will find the true essence at its core, which is something holy. Everything is from the divine in this world. This is what people who are interested in spirituality fail to see. They believe spirituality should be rainbows and unicorns and nothing else. Our light is born from our darkness, because without our darkness, how would we even know what light was? Our Kadosh is born from our Klippot. An important concept in the Kabbalah is that of the Tzaddik, or righteous one. Being that this word begins at the next letter in the series, Tzadi, we will discuss this more in length in the next video. In more simplistic terms, a tzaddik is a righteous one who hunts for what are called the fallen sparks of God, another elaborate concept you should look into pertaining to the Kabbalah. A way in which to view this is a spiritual practitioner who is seeking to unify themselves with the divine by elevating these fallen sparks, making them holy, and delivering them back to the divine. When I say fallen sparks, I am referring to things of holiness which are lost in the shells of physical reality. For those who study Kabbalah, they will know that Malkut is the place where the world of the Klippot resides under, the adverse tree of life. Take a moment to digest this by thinking about the symbolism of the fruit in the shell. This is to say that holiness hides in plain matter, even things that appear as evil. There are many spiritual systems that tell us physical matter is evil, and we must resist its temptation. On the contrary, though, physical matter is what allows us to explore the holiness and beauty of the divine. We need both, just as a ship needs an anchor to hold it in place. Spirit needs an anchor to manifest it. So the job of the tzaddik is to hunt these fallen sparks, removing the shell and finding the divine essence at its core, thus elevating it back to a state of divinity or holiness. The word that means to hunt in Hebrew is zod, and lo and behold, it equals the number 100, the same as Qoph. I know this is a lot to take in, however, I hope you are seeing the intimate correlation between all these concepts and how they tie into this single letter. As I previously said, the further we dive into the alphabet, the farther down the rabbit hole we go. An interesting idea to take note of is the level of the throat in the human body. Although I will not go into much detail on this area of the body, I will urge you to research into its esoteric principles. The throat can be seen as a gateway between the highest levels of consciousness and the lower levels of consciousness. In the Kabbalah, the throat is related to the quasi-invisible sephira of Dat, or knowledge, which is seen either as a synthesis of the three supernals of the Tree of Life, or the gateway to the Klippotic realms. This reinforces the idea between Kadosh and Klippot, and Dat being the gateway to either or. Interestingly, the Hebrew word loa, spelt lamed ayin, is a word that means throat, and its numeration is 100, the same as Qoph. So we will now move into our last meaning of the word Qoph, which will once again tie into these concepts we have discussed thus far. Qoph can also mean monkey. You may wonder, how does this relate to our discussion? I want to start off by naming two figures that are related to the concept of the monkey. We will first discuss the Egyptian deity known as Thoth, god of wisdom. Now, Thoth is also related to other deities which fall under the same archetype, such as Hermes and Mercury. Mercury, as we know, is intimately connected to our minds and is considered the messenger of the gods. Some of you may not know this, but Thoth was depicted many times as having a baboon which follows him around. Thoth is also pictured with the ibis bird. A way in which we can intimately view this is that Thoth, as relating to the mind, can either be the baboon or the ibis. As the baboon, we are trapped in our lower minds, our reasoning. Think of a monkey as imitating others. This lower mind is what can trap us in our shells, our Klippot, allowing us to stay consciously asleep, following the beat of society's drum rather than our own. It can resemble us not thinking for ourselves, but simply doing what we are told is normal and correct, often reinforcing our shadow self. Now, the ibis is representative of our higher mind, which, as you were told in the lecture on Resh, must learn to analyze the lower mind. The lower mind is tied to our ego, and the higher mind our awareness, the observer, the watcher. In certain systems, we are told that the mind is evil, and in others, like Hermeticism, we are told everything is mind, showing that mind is also important. So one learns to know the higher mind by analyzing the lower mind. Therefore, both are important, just as the Klippot are important in relation to Kadosh, holiness. The ibis gazes into the waters and is the watcher which observes the waters of the lower mind, the baboon, the monkey mind. A beautiful way to observe this idea is through the use of tarot cards and their attributed colors. So the Fool, as we discussed as being Aleph, is the color yellow. This is the same color as the Magician tarot card, which is the card of Mercury or Thoth. Tiferet is also the color yellow and relates to the higher mind of awareness. The card of the Lovers, which is Gemini, ruled by Mercury, is the color orange, the same as the color of Hod, the lower reasoning mind. The Klippotic aspect of Hod is called Samael, which means the poison of God, just as the rational mind may stay stuck in the world of matter, poisoning our spiritual ability of thinking beyond the physical world, keeping us trapped in the monkey mind. Another card that is orange is the card of the Sun, which we discussed in the video on Resh. This card resembles the 30th path that connects to Hod. So going back to the Lover's card, which is the 6th card, once again showing an intimate connection to Tiferet, the higher mind, we see two figures which closely resemble the figures in the card of the Devil, number 15. What is the number 15 reduced to its base number? Number 6. This shows that there is an important duality of the mind, and that the higher and lower are both needed in order to free one another. What enslaves one is what also can free them. This is in direct relation to the paradoxical nature of the 12th house, as well as the Klippot hiding the Kadosh. Another important figure I'd like to briefly discuss is the Eastern deity known as Hanuman, the monkey god. As a monkey, he can symbolize the restless monkey mind which traps us, yet he is a god of extreme power and devotion, always acting in accordance with the commands of Lord Rama. This secretly shows us that through intense practice, we may train our monkey, our lower mind, to become a tool for spiritual devotion and evolution, the higher mind. This relates a lot to the path of Qoph, the path of the moon. Although there are many things we can say about this path, the most important aspect to point out is that it is a path where we are tested as a spiritual initiate. We must face our illusions and fears that unconsciously get in the way of our spiritual progress, mostly rooted in our early years of childhood and adolescence. These phantoms and shells are what may trap us in staying within the safety of the monkey mind, as that all that we know and have known. However, these same fears may also liberate us when learning to see through their illusions and reaching the root of what causes them. We must acquire the courage to stand up to our ghosts rather than constantly run away from them, or sending them back to their rooms to sit alone, becoming increasingly more aggressive. So now we have viewed the letter Qoph in quite a few ways, and I hope that by listening to this video you have been able to connect the dots between them, allowing you to see the depth of this letter. Kabbalah can be very complex. However, if we just take the moment to slowly see how these ideas are all pieces which complete a larger puzzle, we can learn to really see the significance behind each letter. So take some time, look a little bit deeper into this letter, maybe do your own research and see what you come up with and how it relates to what we have discussed. I'll see you in our next video, which is on the letter Zadi, the 18th letter. I hope you all enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching.